Welcome our first speaker, David Caswell. He is, well, you are executive product manager at the BBC News, but you are also outgoing executive product manager at BBC News, and we cannot hear yet what you're going to do, so we're excited, but more excited right now to hear about all the cases that you've brought us today. Please.
Okay. So yeah, thank you, and thank you to the organizers for putting this amazing summit together. What I'm going to talk about here is essentially a series of examples, and throughout these examples, I'm going to kind of pepper these with like little strategic implications of kind of what these examples represent. But these are just a sort of a tiny portion of what's possible to do with these tools, and we'll just kind of work through in a very systematic way, kind of building to the more kind of exciting uses of these. But one thing to keep in mind is that it's not just us in the news industry or even in media. It's every single person on the planet has access to these tools. They're very cheap. They're very easy to use. You just need some creativity and some time. So these are really a kind of broadly available sets of functionality. We'll start off here with an article, and I've chosen an article here from actually a competitor of Ekstrabladet, and it's a BT article in Danish. And it's about drones in Ukraine. This is from Sunday, so this came out. This was high on their webpage on Sunday. It's about drones in Ukraine and the effect of better weather on kind of drone operations in Ukraine. And coincidentally, this, or just as an interesting thing, this is actually a rewrite of an article in Norwegian from Dagbladet, and this is a kind of a fairly familiar thing where you've kind of got language moving around between publishers, press association, text, and so on, moving around between different newsrooms. But that just happens to be where the article originated. So what I did, the first thing I did, I don't speak Danish, so I put it into to GPT-4, and I asked GPT-4 to translate it into English, so it did that. Then I needed to verify the translation, because again, I don't speak Danish. So I took the English output, and I put that into Google Translate, turned it back into Danish, and then I put it back into GPT-4, asking GPT-4, and these are both in Danish, this is the previous and the translated article, both in Danish, and I ask it to compare them and to do a little analysis and to give me a list of all the differences, and to do that, to list those differences in English. So it does that. I verified this with a Danish friend, and apparently it's absolutely correct. So this shows a couple of things. It shows that you can work with languages in these tools, but it also shows that models like machine translation models, these models are generally, loosely speaking, replaceable by large language models. And that's a genre in the literature, is large language models are X, machine translation, sentiment analysis, summarization, all of these things that used to have specialty models, these large language models can kind of do. So then I wanted to extend the article. It was a little short, and so I wanted to extend it a little bit. And so I wanted to add some knowledge from from GPT-4. So knowledge is kind of, the knowledge abilities of these models are separate kind of from the language abilities of these models. They're language models, they're not knowledge models. And there's a lot of challenges in using knowledge from the models because of hallucinations and so on. So I wanted to extend it, but I wanted to do it kind of carefully. So I compose a prompt, and you'll see that these prompts, they start with this system prompt at the top where you kind of explain to it what you want it to be. Very important for GPT-4 to kind of start these prompts with a system prompt. So I've asked it to produce some, what is the phrasing here? 2 additional interesting and relevant facts that make the article more comprehensive. And then I've asked it to kind of break out what those are so that I can fact check those claims. So I'm asking it to report on its own fact claims so that I can go ahead and check those fact claims. So it does that, and now I have a longer article. But now I want to put it in a BBC News style. So I take that kind of long article that it's got, and I do this little prompt that says, you are a journalist working at BBC News, blah, blah, blah. Please turn it into a BBC News article. It does that. I'm pretty familiar with the editorial style of BBC News articles. It does a very good job. Now, because we're a broadcaster, I want to turn the BBC News style article into a script, right? So I compose this little prompt. You are an expert broadcast journalist, highly skilled at producing engaging, lively audio and video scripts for news items. turn it into a script. Scripts are very different than articles. It's really a kind of a nuanced but really important difference. This is just an example here. The output from these articles or from GPT-4 is flawless, basically. But I wanted to demonstrate copy editing, so I introduced a whole bunch of errors. So misspellings and double words and US spellings versus UK spellings and all kinds of different punctuation, all kinds of things. And I even had introduced some punctuation and spelling errors into the prompt. No problem. You can get perfect copy editing from all these. So didn't have to do this, but I just introduced some errors to kind of demonstrate this. Summaries, obviously, you've got the prompt, you've got the thing, you've got the little prompt there to just summarize it very, very succinctly into bullet points, 5 bullet points, or even into a single sentence. We've done actually audience research at the BBC around machine summarization. It tests better with audiences than journalist summarization. I mean, that's very prompt dependent, but that was what we found a few years ago. This is a little more strategically terrifying here, to use Gary Rogers' phrase. There's the original article. So I've added an article from Insider about also about drones. This is about how Russia had to stop using its Iranian drones because the plastic would break in the cold weather over the winter. And this is another article about the importance of the pilots of drones in drone warfare. And I've asked it to basically take those 3 articles and essentially take the semantic information from them and summarize that into 3 paragraphs. So that's a 3-paragraph summary of all 3 of these articles. Something that's a little similar is I've taken the original BT article, and I've taken the Norwegian article that it was based on, and I've moved those both to English, and then I've asked it to, this is a little tricky here, I've asked it to take, to make a list of the information that was in the original Norwegian article but didn't make it into the Danish reversioning. And that's a list of the 6 items that were basically kind of left untranslated or unrewritten into the Danish version. So this example and the previous one, they kind of show that what's possible here is this kind of separation between the information in an article and the way that that's communicated. And that's a new thing. I mean, it used to be the article was both the information and the way it was communicated, and now we can kind of pull those apart with these tools. Okay, interview questions. The article is basically based on a single interview with a professor at the Norwegian Defense Academy, a guy named Lars Peter Hege. And so I wanted to get some interview questions, so if you wanted to do a follow-on interview with Professor Hege, these would be some questions to sort of expand that article into some interview questions. You can do that quite easily. Images. Wanted to get some images to illustrate the article. One thing you could do if you wanted to is go into Midjourney 5 or Midjourney 5.1 and do some photojournalism. That is not real photojournalism. I would not recommend that anybody use these tools for photojournalistic purposes. But what you might be able to do is use them for stock imagery purposes, right? So here's a stock image of a drone, and stock images are kind of staged and performative, anyways. So the ethical barriers to using Midjourney and similar models for stock imagery are not as high, and then they're a little less even for these abstract images that sort of illustrate general concepts. So here I've asked it for an abstract image representing drone warfare, for example. So these are examples of ways, good and bad, of how you might use these models to illustrate to illustrate an article. So taking that a little bit further, I've combined GPT-4 and Midjourney, and what I've done is I've asked GPT-4 to break down that story into 8 captions, 8 separate captions that together tell the story. And then also for each of those captions to produce a description of a comic panel, or image, representing that caption. And so what I'm able to do with that is with those 8 captions, I'm able to build up this comic story of the story. So this is the full story here, represented as a comic from a combination of Midjourney 5 and GPT-4. And I did this back, similar things with this back in January using DALL-E, and the quality is so much better now. Like this is a whole other level of comic. You can do this with anime or any kind of graphical style you want. Okay, so now I want to bring it into audio, and so So I took that original script. Remember, we turned it from an article into a script. So I took that original script and I put it through a, a synthetic voice from a company called 11 Labs. And then I rendered it as a video through a company called Audiogram. And what I want you to listen to here is the quality of the synthetic voice. So I'm going to play this. This is about a minute long.
In recent days, Ukraine has experienced a surge in drone attacks. Ukrainian forces have successfully intercepted a significant number of these unmanned aerial vehicles, shooting down 18 of 24 drones targeting Kyiv and 12 of 15 kamikaze drones aimed at Odessa on Thursday night alone. According to Professor Lars Peter Haga of the Norwegian Defense Academy, the increase in drone activity can be attributed to more favorable weather conditions. Clear skies and sunshine improve visibility, making it easier for drones using cameras for navigation to operate. While some drones rely on satellite navigation and are unaffected by visibility, human-controlled aircraft still face challenges in poor weather. These improved weather conditions have also enabled Ukraine to adopt a more offensive stance, as previously indicated. Consequently, Professor Haga anticipates a general increase in activity related to the ongoing conflict.
Okay, so there's audio from a script from a BBC-style article from a translated version of a Danish article in BT. But just they were trying to reach a younger audience than that. Did the script again, but this time aimed it at a younger audience. So this is the same story, but with a script aimed at a younger audience.
Hey, everyone. We've got some important news coming out of Ukraine. Over the past few days, there have been several drone attacks in the region. But guess what? Ukrainian forces have been on their A-game intercepting a significant number of these drones. Just the other night, they managed to shoot down 18 out of 24 drones that were targeting Kyiv and 12 out of 15 kamikaze drones with targets in Odessa. Impressive, right? So why this sudden increase in drone activity? Well, Professor Lars Peter Haga from the Norwegian Defense Academy says it's all down to the weather. With clear skies and sunshine, visibility has improved, making it easier for drones with cameras to navigate. Although some drones use satellite navigation and aren't affected by visibility, human-controlled aircraft still struggle in poor weather. Interestingly, the better weather also means Ukraine can take a more offensive approach. Professor Haga anticipates an increase in activity related to the ongoing conflict.
Okay, that's pretty cool, but you can kind of go to the limits of your imagination with this stuff. So I've taken the same news article and I've basically turned it into a journalistically correct poem, and this is a reading of that poem.
In the skies of Ukraine, a battle rages on. Drone attacks in the night, but they won't last for long. Ukrainian forces stand strong. Their aim is sure, shooting down those invaders, 18 of 24. Kamikaze drones in Odessa. They got a target in sight, but 12 out of 15 were shot down that night. Professor Haga of Norway says the weather plays a part. Clear skies and sunshine makes it easier to start. The weather's a factor in this deadly game, and satellite navigation, it's all part of the same. But for human drone pilots, the challenge remains when the battle's fought in cloud and rain with everything to gain. As the weather turns better, Ukraine takes a stand. Offensive moves are anticipated in this war-torn land. A general increase in activity, that's what Professor Haga sees. In the ongoing conflict, it's the calm before the breeze.
So this is all GPT-4. So I'm going to keep going with these things, but that synthetic voice is the best synthetic voice I've come across. There's Apple have a synthetic voice that's a little better, but you can't get access to that. So you're going to hear less good synthetic voices from now on, but just kind of imagine that kind of voice used to do the readings. It really is kind of the way most synthetic voices will be soon. So let's move to video. This is from a company called Synthesia in London, and what I've done is I've taken that original script for a traditional BBC audience, and I've put some images in there, and I've used a synthetic avatar to read that script.
In recent days, Ukraine has experienced a surge in drone attacks. Ukrainian forces have successfully intercepted a significant number of these unmanned aerial vehicles, shooting down 18 of 24 drones targeting Kiev and 12 of 15 kamikaze drones aimed at Odessa on Thursday night
not
alone.
quite as good.
According to Professor Lars Peder Hager of the Norwegian Defence Academy, the increase in drone activity can be attributed to more favorable weather conditions. Clear skies and sunshine improve visibility, making it easier for drones using cameras for navigation to operate. While some drones rely on satellite navigation and are unaffected by visibility, human-controlled aircraft still face challenges in poor weather.
Okay, you get the idea. So then I moved this to a to a different rendering, avatar rendering tool. And so this is from a company called DID, so GPT-4 script. I used the young person, the younger audience script, excuse me. And since the original article was in Norwegian, I figured I'd render it as a troll. And so basically, this tool, this DVID tool, it's connected up with this stable diffusion text-to-image model. So basically, you kind of put a text description in, and if you can render something that has a face, they can turn that face into a synthetic avatar and then put a synthetic voice on it. So this is reading the young person script.
Hey everyone. We've got some important news coming out of Ukraine. Over the past few days, there have been several drone attacks in the region. But guess what? Ukrainian forces have been on their A game, intercepting a significant number of these drones. Just the other night, they managed to shoot down 18 out of 24 drones that were targeting Kiev, and 12 out of 15 kamikaze drones with targets in Odessa. Impressive, right? So, why this sudden increase in drone activity? Well, Professor
So you get the idea. There's a whole bunch of these. Here's another one from a company called ArtFlow. And they have a very kind of, obviously artistic kind of bent on this, but they have a synthetic avatar and a very good synthetic voice that goes with it. And they're kind of unusual because the diversity of their avatars and synthetic voices is huge. So it's in terms of the ability to do these in a very, very diverse set of circumstances, which kind of go with the subject matter. You can, this is a very impressive tool. So let's play a little bit of this.
In recent days, Ukraine has experienced a surge in drone attacks. Ukrainian forces have successfully intercepted a significant number of these unmanned aerial vehicles, shooting down 18 of 24 drones targeting Kiev and 12 of 15 kamikaze drones aimed at Odessa on Thursday night alone. According to Professor Lars Peder Hager of the Norwegian Defence Academy, the increase in drone activity can be attributed to more favorable weather conditions. Clear skies.
So you get the idea there. So if you're going to make videos, you kind of need some original music. So I have no musical ability whatsoever. I don't know what a melody is. I just listen to music and that's it. But I wanted to compose music, original music for a video about this article, basically. And so I did that using a tool called SoundDraw. And so the backdrop of this is a slideshow using images that come from the original Norwegian article. So I kind of took all those images and I stuck them into a slideshow. And then I did a little bit of composition using SoundDraw. This is about 15 minutes worth of work. And I come up with an original orchestral composition to illustrate my slideshow. So here it is. This is a world premiere of my original orchestral composition. Enough of that. That's Hans Zimmer out of a job. So that's a lot of fun. You can kind of, you can do any musical style you can think of. If you want to do folk songs or jazz or whatever strikes your fancy, you can compose in that. What they've done is they've figured out how to offer the abstractions for music in their interface in a way that anybody can access them. There's been a lot of these tools around for a few years, but you had to kind of have some serious musical experience and familiarity to use them, but this one anyone can use. So I don't have a fancy demo for this one because I couldn't get it working in time. But essentially, this is a kind of a thing I'm working through at the moment around using agents. So agents are a big deal with large language models right now. And essentially what they do is they enable you to use the large language model in a kind of a chained way. And so you can basically kind of give these agents very high-level instructions, and they can kind of decompose those into specific tasks, and then they can go out and do the tasks, and then kind of bring back results from the tasks, and then decompose some of those or make choices based on those, and then go out and do more tasks. So they can take these high-level objectives, and they can kind of go through this cascade of decomposition, task decomposition, and action, and then interpretation of the results of the action to do tasks. And again, I haven't got this specific example working, but here's kind of what I'm aiming towards, and I think this is absolutely possible. I've done very simpler versions of this. So essentially, a high-level task might be something like investigate suspicious expenses by UK politicians. And again, this is illustrative only. Haven't got this working yet. And so what it might do is it might figure out, well, there's this database of expenses from politicians. You know, what's an API call into that database? Figure out the API call, go in, work through the data, identify MPs who have reported any unusual or ill-defined expenses, and things like unusual and ill-defined, these kind of subjective, you know, what's suspicious, what's interesting, what's newsworthy, you can kind of get that out of these models. And then for the MPs that it finds suspicious expenses, maybe email the MPs and ask for an explanation, and then evaluate responses, and then write an article about, you know, suspicious expenses or you know, MPs without a valid excuse for their suspicious expenses, something like that. So this essentially is, you might recognize it. This is the Guardian's expense thing from about 10 or 12 years ago, which they had to kind of crowdsource. But I think this is absolutely possible using agents. I've done kind of very simple versions of this. There's a set of tools that have appeared mostly within the last 2 months. The ones that I'm using are mostly LangChain agents, and then GPT a little bit now. There's another one called Baby AGI. AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. That might be a bit of a stretch. But these are going to be very, very powerful. I think they're absolutely capable of doing simple investigative, or at least assisting intensively in investigative stories. And not just in data-centered investigative stories, because these large language models, in addition to generating language, they can understand language very well. So there's a whole bunch of possibilities here. So that's it. These are the tools that I've used to kind of put all these things together. But there's like a million other tools, and they're kind of popping up like mushrooms all over the place. And there's just this whole world to explore. And again, everybody has access to these, right? It's not just us. It's everybody. And so kind of going back to this original question at the start, you know, what can we and everybody else already do with generative AI? You know, it's basically, you know, everything in media production, basically. It's pretty incredible. And I think watching what's been happening over the last 6 months or even 18 months or so, I think it's reasonable to assume that all of this will go to its sort of end state capability at some point in the near future, that you'll be able to do quality, you know, the video, the audio, all the rest of it, that is absolutely as good as the best of human output. So what does it all mean? Well, it's basically disruptive, obviously. But it's not just disruptive, it's disruptive because it's already happening on top of another disruption. So the first disruption that we've all been working through as news organizations for the last 20-odd years is the disruption that came from democratizing the distribution of content. So it used to be that distributing content required, you know, airwaves and transmitter towers, or it required printing presses and distribution trucks. Then everybody could do it with the internet and with social, and that disruption has kind of, you know, we're all intimately familiar with the impact of that. But now I think we've got a second wave of disruption coming because the production of content is being democratized. You don't need Hans Zimmer to come in and write the score to your video, or you know, professional illustrators or professional you know, presenters, talking head presenters, or expert writers. You don't need any of that because you can just use the tools. So operations like a newsroom where you had a whole bunch of people that did all these specialty tasks, there's a disruptive potential here that you can get a much smaller number of people plus all of these tools and do kind of similar things. And that's already popping up. This is the about page for a company called superblog.ai. I have no idea what superblog.ai does, but I like their about page. So there's this guy, Sai, who is the chief super officer, and then there's ChatGPT, which is the chief everything else officer. And that's kind of amusing, but that is actually not that far from the truth with what's possible with these tools, and this is sort of obviously highly disruptive. So the whole hype thing, we've seen a few of these renditions of the Gartner hype curve. This is actually from Gartner, and this is from July of 2022, and I think after the ChatGPT moment, that the top of that curve is a lot higher for ChatGPT. But in July of 2022, this is where they placed generative AI, that little red arrow there. Sam Altman at OpenAI, the CEO of OpenAI, he talks a lot about this as well. In this tweet that he put out after GPT-4 was launched, he talks about all of the limitations that are in the model are very, very true, but also this interesting fact that he kind of brings up again and again and again, in that these things seem more impressive when you first use them than they do after you've been using them for a while. And I agree with that. It looks like magic and amazing capabilities, and you've probably all experienced this with ChatGPT. But just keep using it, and after a couple of months, you start to think, okay, it's a set of tools. Now what do I do with it? So I think the space for media production and journalism specifically is after that. It's basically this sort of realization that these are just tools. You can do amazing things, but journalism is still a separate thing that can use these tools. And so what I think that does is, it means with this hype cycle that we're kind of going through and the inevitable trough of disillusionment that's coming, that there's time here to sort of figure out how to use these tools, how to use them in infrastructure, how to use them in workflows, how to find that kind of defensible competitive advantage that you can use these tools to enhance. I think there's a lot of optimism here, actually, despite the fact that everybody can kind of do the production, the technical side of production. So I'm going to leave it there, and hopefully there's a few minutes left for questions. We got 3 minutes.
We have a few minutes. Okay, in one word, wow. We said that today would be fun and scary. I guess this is fun and scary and useful.
Yeah, and just like, everybody can do this. This whole thing, all of this, was 4 hours at my kitchen table last Sunday. So I would, all of these tools, just play with them. They're so much fun. You'll have a lot of fun and learn a lot.
How would you reorganize a newsroom, knowing that this disruptive force is here to use for everyone?
So I don't think the existing organization structure and workflows of newsrooms are going to last that much longer. I think there's lots of long-term defensible advantage that newsrooms have, but I think they're going to require new structures. I think there's a lot of work to do to figure out what those are, but they're going to be more on the front end of the value chain, so the news gathering, the sort of the conceptual side. They're going to be less on sort of how you communicate that, because we've got tools that can do that. So I don't know how this is going to work out, but my guess would be that there'll be a much more kind of news gathering analysis emphasis, and then maybe some smaller, even separate technical teams, or kind of teams that kind of work through and use the infrastructure to actually do the communication. But there's a whole other part too, which is which is kind of boring that people don't like to talk about. The infrastructure to serve these, to put the right piece of content in front of the right audience member at the right time, it goes way beyond the challenges of recommenders now. So I think there's a lot of rejigging of news organizations that's inevitably coming.
Ezra, you had a question. Please take a microphone.
Hey.
Well, I just talk a lot. Amazing experiments.
Could you stand up, Ezra, just so we can see you?
Okay. Amazing experiments, and really great to see. I was wondering, how quickly do you think this goes from experiments that you do to production somewhere at BBC? Because
slowly. So I should say this has got. This is not the BBC. This is I'm kind of speaking here in my own capacity, not in as a representative of the BBC. I don't think the BBC is going to do a lot of this stuff in the near term. because the BBC is primarily focused on trust as a USP. And so being first out the gate with a lot of these tools in an environment where a lot of these are going to be misused, obviously, in all kinds of ways. And I think it's reasonable to expect that there's going to be a certain amount of distrust around generative AI in the short term, maybe even permanently. And so the BBC will not want to be in the middle of that, given the importance of trust to its unique selling proposition. So I would not expect to see this from the BBC anytime soon. There's a lot of back-end stuff, tagging and various kinds of categorization, moving things around between languages, all that kind of stuff, which is lots of opportunity there, but not public-facing. Yeah.
Please.
Johan Linden from SVT. I wonder, from an engineering perspective, how do you think these large language models will change the way we work as LM engineers or developers?
So a lot of the work that I've been doing is actually not the fun user interface stuff. It's actually the APIs and the tooling that would sort of enable this. And I'm doing a lot of coding in that. And as a coding tool, these tools are amazing. Like these are they dramatically extend the range of what individual developers can do. I think that there's a set of challenges that aren't really technical challenges. They're not really coding challenges. They're around how to imagine the interface between newsroom tasks and what these tools are capable of. I think the coding side of it, like building the tools, is actually fairly trivial, and even more trivial now that we have these language models and co-pilots and so on to help us. But we're still in this phase where the metaphors are not there. We don't really know. It's like when graphical user interfaces came along and sort of, I think it was Apple that chose the desktop metaphor and the file metaphor and all this. And we don't even think about those now. We just talk about files, but that's from a paper file. We're still kind of at the point where we don't know what those metaphors and abstractions are to do that. So I think that's the challenge, right? It's an imaginative challenge.
We could go on for hours, but thank you so much.
Very welcome. Yeah.